The council chamber floated in the darkness of space like a jewel made of crystal and light. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated seats, arranged in a perfect circle that had symbolized equality and cooperation for 12,000 years. The air hummed with translation devices, turning thousands of languages into a single unified stream of understanding. Today, that understanding would lead to the greatest mistake in galactic history. Elder diplomat Kethizar stood at the center of the chamber. His forearms spread wide in a gesture that his species used to show importance. His skin, usually a calm blue, had turned a dark purple that indicated anger. In one of his upper hands, he held a small data crystal that glowed with a soft red light. Honored members of the council, Kethizar began, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. For 12,000 years we have maintained peace across this galaxy. We have welcomed 133 species into our fold. We have built a civilization based on law, order, and mutual respect. Never in all those millennia has any species rejected our invitation to join. He paused, letting his words sink in. The representatives shifted in their seats. Some leaned forward with curiosity. Others showed signs of concern through the various ways their bodies expressed emotion. Until now, Kethizar continued, the humans, a species we discovered merely 3 years ago, have done the unthinkable. They have rejected our generous offer of integration. They have refused to accept the wisdom of this council. And their response, he held up the data crystal. Their response was a single word, no. A wave of shocked sounds rippled through the chamber. Clicks, whistles, rumbles, and gasps in 100 different forms. The representative from the Zektari species, a being that looked like a floating collection of geometric shapes, pulsed with orange light. Surely they misunderstood the offer, it asked. Kethizar's skin turned an even darker shade. We gave them 3 years to consider. We sent our best diplomats. We explained the benefits of joining the council. We showed them our technology, our culture, our vast resources. We offered them everything. He placed his lower hands flat against his chest, a sign of sincerity in his culture. And they looked at all of it and simply said no. Another representative spoke up. This one was Councillor Vren, a member of the insectoid thrax species. Her mandibles clicked together as she talked. What do we know about their military capacity? A holographic display appeared above the center of the chamber. It showed a small cluster of 6 star systems, connected by thin lines that represented primitive faster-than-light travel routes. 6 systems. The Council controlled territories spanning 50,000 systems. The humans control 6 systems, Kethizar explained. They possess approximately 200 warships. Their technology is adequate but far behind our own. Their fastest ships take 3 weeks to cross distances our vessels cover in 2 days. They have no energy shields, no quantum weapons, no null field generators. By our estimates, they are approximately 500 years behind our current technology level. Fleet Commander Zarthun rose from his seat. He was tall even for his species, with silver scales that caught the light of the chamber's artificial stars. He had served in the Council military for 300 years, and had commanded fleets during the last interspecies conflict 9 centuries ago. That conflict had been resolved in less than a year with minimal casualties on both sides. If I may speak, Zarthun said, his voice deep and measured. I have reviewed the human specifications. With respect to the Council, I believe we are discussing a police action, not a military campaign. I could secure their compliance with a force of 1,000 ships. Kethizar nodded. The War Directorate has already considered this. However, given the symbolic importance of this action, we recommend a more substantial show of force. We must make it clear to the entire galaxy that rejection of the Council's authority will not be tolerated. Otherwise, we risk encouraging other species to question our legitimacy. How substantial? Another counselor asked. 10,000 ships, Kethizar said flatly. The chamber erupted in conversation. 10,000 ships was more than half of the Council's active military fleet. It was the kind of force assembled to conquer entire sectors of space, not to deal with a species that controlled only 6 systems. Zarthun's eyes widened slightly. Elder diplomat, with respect, that is excessive. 10,000 ships against 200? It would be like using a starship cannon to destroy a single insect. Precisely, Kethizar replied. This will be over quickly with minimal loss of life. The humans will see our fleet, understand the futility of resistance, and surrender immediately. No shots will need to be fired. It is the merciful option. The vote was called. One by one, the representatives of 47 species registered their approval. The holographic display showed the results. Unanimous agreement. War was declared on humanity. The Council preferred to call it a compliance enforcement action, but the meaning was the same. As the chamber began to empty, Zarthun approached Kethizar. "I will need 2 months to assemble the fleet and brief the commanders," he said. "Most of our captains have never seen actual combat. This will be a training exercise as much as an operation." "Take 3 months," Kethizar said. "Do it properly. I want this to be a demonstration of council power that the galaxy remembers for the next 12,000 years." In a small observation room connected to the main chamber, a single human watched the proceedings through a transparent wall. Ambassador David Chen stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back. He had requested permission to observe the vote, knowing what the outcome would be. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes held a deep sadness. A young aide approached him. "Ambassador Chen, should we send word back to Earth?" Chen nodded slowly. "Yes, tell them the Council has chosen war. Activate Protocol Sentinel." "Sir," the aide hesitated. "During the debate, you could have said something. You could have tried to change their minds." Chen turned to look at the now empty council chamber. "I spent 3 years trying to change their minds. I explained that humanity might be primitive by their standards, but we are not helpless. I warned them that we have been fighting wars among ourselves for our entire history. I told them that we never stopped innovating, never stopped preparing for the next conflict." He shook his head. They heard the words, but never understood the meaning. They looked at our small territory and our simple ships and saw weakness. "What did they miss?" the aide asked. Chen walked toward the exit. "They missed the fact that we knew this was coming. From the moment we met the Council, we knew that an organization that had enforced peace for 12,000 years would not tolerate anyone who refused to join. So we prepared." He paused at the doorway. "They're about to learn what humanity does best. We survive, we adapt, and when someone threatens our existence, we become something they never expected." 3 months later, Fleet Commander Zarthun stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dawn of Unity. Around him, 10,000 ships prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. The largest military fleet assembled in 900 years. All to deal with a species that controlled 6 systems. "All ships report ready," his tactical officer announced. Zar then looked at the star map showing their destination. The human colony of New Britannia. Intelligence reports indicated it had a population of 12 million and a small defense force of 20 ships. "Engage FTL drives," he ordered. "Let us end this quickly and return to peace." The fleet vanished into the strange space between spaces, carrying with them the confidence of a civilization that had forgotten what real war looked like. Behind them, the Council celebrated their decisive action. None of them noticed the small human observation ship that had been watching from a distant moon, recording everything. The message it sent back to Earth was simple. They're coming. All of them. The Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Britannia system. 10,000 warships, each one the size of a small city, materialized in perfect formation. The sight was magnificent and terrifying. Stars reflected off their hulls, creating a constellation of artificial suns that outshone the natural ones. Fleet Commander Zarthun stood on his bridge, watching the tactical displays light up with information. His crew worked efficiently at their stations, running scans of the system and preparing to send the surrender demand to the human colony. "Tactical report," Zarthun ordered. His tactical officer studied the displays with confusion. "Sir, the colony appears to be empty. Life signs are minimal. Maybe a few thousand maintenance personnel, but the 12 million colonists are gone." Zarthun frowned. "Gone where?" "We have been monitoring their communications. There was no evacuation order. Unknown, sir. However, I am detecting unusual objects in orbit around the planet. They appear to be crude nuclear devices, hundreds of them, arranged in a spherical pattern around the world." "Nuclear devices?" Zarthun felt a chill run through his scales. The Council had banned nuclear weapons 6,000 years ago as barbaric and inefficient. "Are they armed?" "Scans indicate yes, sir. They are active and ready to detonate." Zarthun considered his options. Nuclear weapons were primitive, but in sufficient numbers they could damage his ships, especially the smaller escort vessels. Pull the fleet back to safe distance. Send a communication drone to demand they disarm those weapons immediately. The communication drone launched, a small automated vessel that flew toward the planet. It got within 5,000 kilometers before the nuclear devices began to detonate. Not all at once, but in a carefully timed sequence. Each explosion created a massive electromagnetic pulse. The individual pulses were not particularly powerful, but together they created a cascading wave of interference that washed across the system. Screens on the bridge flickered. Communication channels filled with static. The carefully organized fleet formations began to drift as ships lost contact with each other. "Restore communications," Zarthun ordered. "Get me visual confirmation of all fleet elements." Before his crew could respond, the human ships appeared. They came from behind the system's gas giant, where they had been hiding in the planet's massive magnetic field. There were not 20 ships as intelligence had predicted. There were over 300 and they were moving fast, but they were not moving toward the Council fleet in a traditional battle formation. Instead, they split into dozens of small groups, each one targeting a different section of the scattered Council ships. They were not trying to engage the main battle line. They were going after the supply ships, the repair vessels, the communication relays that kept the fleet coordinated. Captain Sarah Zhao commanded one of these human strike groups from her destroyer, the Relentless. Her ship was small compared to the massive Council dreadnoughts, barely 200 meters long. But it was fast, and it could turn and accelerate in ways that the Council ships could not match. "Target locked," her weapons officer announced. "Council supply vessel, minimal defensive capability. Fire missiles, full spread," Zhao ordered. "Then get us out of here before their escorts respond." The Relentless launched 20 missiles and immediately banked hard, its engines flaring as it accelerated away. Behind them, the missiles struck the supply ship, tearing through its hull. The vessel had shields, but they were designed to protect against energy weapons, not the chemical explosive missiles that humanity still used. "Next target," Zhao said calmly. "Stay mobile. Don't give them a clean shot." This pattern repeated across the system. Human ships would appear, strike a vulnerable target, and vanish before the Council's heavy warships could bring their weapons to bear. When Council ships did manage to engage, the humans refused to fight. They simply ran, leading the pursuing ships away from the main fleet. Zarthun watched in growing frustration as his carefully organized formation fell into chaos. His ships were powerful, his crews were well-trained, and his technology was superior. But the humans were not fighting the kind of war he knew how to fight. They were not meeting him in honorable fleet combat. They were attacking like parasites, biting and running, never committing to a real battle. "Order all ships to maintain formation," he commanded. "Do not pursue individual human vessels. They are trying to divide us." But the damage was already done. The electromagnetic pulses had disrupted fleet communications. Ships were scattered across the system. Supply lines were in chaos, and the humans just kept attacking over and over, targeting anything that looked vulnerable. Days turned into weeks. The Council fleet managed to establish orbit around New Britannia and began searching for the evacuated colonists. They found empty cities, abandoned farms, and nothing else. The humans had taken everyone and left nothing behind but traps. Zarthun's supply situation grew critical. His fleet needed food, fuel, and ammunition. The supply ships that had been damaged needed repairs. He requested reinforcements from the Council, explaining that the situation was more complicated than anticipated. The Council's response was dismissive. They sent 5,000 additional ships and a message telling him to stop embarrassing the Council with his inability to handle a primitive species. Captain Zhao received the intelligence report about the incoming reinforcements while her ship was resupplying at a hidden human base in the asteroid belt. The base was a marvel of engineering, carved into a massive asteroid and powered by fusion reactors that were invisible to Council sensors. 5,000 more ships, her first officer said. That brings their total force to 15,000. We have maybe 800 ships across all our fleets. Zhao studied the star charts on her screen. They still don't understand. They think this is about numbers. They think if they just bring enough ships, we'll surrender. She pointed to a location on the map. The reinforcements will come through this jump point, and they'll be traveling in a convoy because they need to protect their supply ships. You want to ambush them? her first officer asked. I want to teach them a lesson, Zhao replied. They chose this war. Now they get to learn what it means to fight an enemy that doesn't play by their rules. The ambush was perfect. When the council reinforcements arrived at the jump point, they found the space around them filled with mines. Not nuclear mines this time, but simple kinetic devices. Chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic launchers. No energy signatures to detect, no radiation to track, just metal moving through space. The mines tore through the convoy's formation. Ships collided with debris. Others activated their shields only to find that kinetic weapons cared nothing for energy barriers. The defensive escorts rushed forward to protect the supply ships, which was exactly when the human fleet appeared. 800 human ships against 5,000 council vessels. By every logical calculation, it should have been a massacre, but the humans had chosen their moment carefully. The council ships were in disarray, their formation broken by the mines. The humans concentrated all their firepower on the supply ships, ignoring the warships entirely. They destroyed 40% of the supply convoy in 15 minutes, then retreated before the council fleet could organize a response. Zhao watched from her bridge as the council ships pursued half-heartedly, then gave up and turned back to protect their remaining supplies. Message from Fleet Admiral Chen, her communication officer announced. He says well done and to prepare for the next phase. What's the next phase? Her first officer asked. Zhao smiled grimly. We stop playing defense. We've shown them they can't beat us in our territory. Now we show them they're not safe in theirs. Back at the council chambers, Kethazar faced an angry assembly. The quick police action was now entering its 4th month. Casualties were mounting. Supply costs were astronomical, and the humans showed no signs of surrendering. How is this possible? One counselor demanded. We have overwhelming superiority in numbers and technology. Kethazar's skin had turned a pale gray, a sign of stress in his species. The humans are not fighting a conventional war. They refuse to engage our main fleet. They target our logistics instead. Our ships are designed for fleet battles, not for hunting small groups of raiders across dozens of systems. Then adapt, another counselor shouted. We have been the dominant power in this galaxy for 12,000 years. We cannot allow a species of primitives to humiliate us. The vote was taken. The police action was officially upgraded to a full military campaign. The council began mobilizing reserves, calling up ships from defense fleets across their territory. They would bring 50,000 ships to bear against humanity, an overwhelming force that could not possibly fail. In a hidden bunker deep beneath the surface of Earth, Admiral David Chen received the intelligence reports. He had been promoted from ambassador to supreme commander of humanity's military forces. He studied the numbers with experienced eyes. 50,000 ships, he said to his assembled commanders. They're committed now. Everything they have. Can we win against those numbers? One general asked. Chen looked up at the star map on the wall. It showed human territory in blue and council territory in red. The red vastly outnumbered the blue. But there were also yellow markers scattered across the map. Hidden, the council chamber buzzed with heated debate. Representatives from 47 species argued, shouted, and demanded action. The military campaign that was supposed to last weeks had dragged on for 8 months. The humans continued to resist, and worse, they were winning tactical victories that embarrassed the galaxy's most powerful coalition. Kethazar stood at the center of the chamber, his forearms trembling slightly. His skin had lost its vibrant blue color entirely, replaced by a sickly gray. Honored members, he began, his voice strained. The War Directorate recommends we escalate to Total War Protocols. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Total War Protocols had not been invoked in over 5,000 years. They represented the complete mobilization of council resources, the suspension of normal laws, and the authorization to use any means necessary to achieve victory. Councillor Vren's mandibles clicked nervously. Total war? Against 6 systems? This is madness. It is necessity, Kethazar replied. The humans have proven more resourceful than anticipated. They have also proven willing to use tactics that we banned as barbaric millennia ago. If we are to win this conflict, we must stop treating it as a police action and recognize it for what it has become. A war for the future of galactic order. The vote passed with only 3 dissenting voices. 50,000 ships became the new mobilization target. Every council species would contribute their full military capacity. The humans would face the combined might of galactic civilization, and they would break. Fleet Commander Zarthun received his new orders while still dealing with the chaos at New Britannia. He was to take command of the entire council military. His objective was simple: destroy the human capacity to wage war and force their unconditional surrender. The rules of engagement had changed. He was no longer required to minimize casualties or preserve human infrastructure. He was authorized to do whatever was necessary. He looked at the authorization codes with a heavy heart. In 300 years of service, he had never seen such orders. The council was afraid, and fear had made them willing to abandon their principles. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we have a problem. Our scouts report that the human colonies we've been planning to attack are empty. Again." "All of them?" Zarthun asked. "Yes, sir. New Terra, New Shanghai, New Lagos, all evacuated. They left behind cities that are fully powered and operational, but no people." Zarthun felt ice form in his blood. "It's a trap. They want us to commit forces to occupying empty worlds while they strike elsewhere." He was correct, but he did not understand the full scope of the trap until it was too late. The council fleet divided its forces, sending occupation groups to each of the abandoned colonies. Each group consisted of several thousand ships, enough to overwhelm any expected resistance. The fleet that arrived at New Terra found a beautiful world of blue oceans and green continents. Cities sparkled in the sunlight, their towers reaching toward the sky. Farms and forests spread across the landscape. It looked peaceful and inviting. The occupation force moved into orbit and began sending down landing parties to secure the surface. Captain Zhao watched the council ships position themselves from a vantage point 50 million kilometers away. Her ship was hidden behind the system's outer planets, running silent with all systems except passive sensors shut down. Around her, 300 other human ships waited in the same condition. "They're in position," her tactical officer reported. "All their ships are committed to orbit around the planet." "Good," Zhao said. "Activate the package." On New Terra's surface, devices that had been carefully hidden beneath every major city hummed to life. They were not bombs in the traditional sense. They were geological weapons, systems designed to trigger the tectonic instabilities that human scientists had spent 2 years creating. The planet's crust had been carefully weakened along fault lines. Now those fault lines began to move. The earthquake started small but quickly grew to catastrophic levels. Entire continents buckled. The ocean floor split open. Magma erupted from thousands of volcanic vents simultaneously. Within minutes, the beautiful world was tearing itself apart. The council ships in orbit scrambled to retreat, but they had positioned themselves too close to the planet. The debris from the dying world struck them like a shotgun blast. Rocks the size of mountains, moving at orbital velocities, smashed through shields and hulls. 3,000 council ships died in the first hour. The survivors fled the system, their captains broadcasting frantic warnings about the human capacity for destruction. They had expected military resistance. They had not expected an enemy willing to destroy their own worlds to inflict casualties. Zarthun watched the reports come in from his flagship. New Terra was not the only trap. Similar scenarios played out at every evacuated human colony. The humans had turned their own worlds into weapons, sacrificing territory they could no longer defend to bleed the council fleet. "Casualties?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. 14,000 ships destroyed or heavily damaged, sir. Maybe half can be repaired, but it will take months, maybe years. Zarthun sat down heavily in his command chair. 14,000 ships. The entire council fleet before this war had been only 20,000. They had lost more than half their mobilized forces attacking empty planets. "The humans," his second officer said quietly. "They're insane. What species destroys their own worlds?" "A species that is willing to do anything to win," Zarthun replied. "A species we should have studied more carefully before we declared war." But the council was not ready to accept defeat. The War Directorate, meeting in emergency session, made a decision that would change everything. If the humans were willing to destroy their own colonies, then the Council would target the one place humanity could not afford to lose. They would attack Earth itself. The authorization came with clear instructions. Use planet-killer weapons. End the war in a single strike. Show the galaxy that the Council could not be defied without consequences. Zarthun protested. Planet killers are banned by our own laws. If we use them, we become the monsters we claim to be fighting against. Kethizar's response was cold. The humans have already broken every convention of civilized warfare. They have used nuclear weapons, biological agents, and scorched earth tactics. They destroyed their own worlds to kill our soldiers. If we do not end this now, they will continue to bleed us until we have nothing left. The Council will not fall because we were too principled to do what was necessary. The Planet Killer fleet was assembled in secret, 10 massive vessels, each one carrying weapons capable of cracking a world's crust and rendering it uninhabitable. They were ancient weapons, built during the Council's formation when they needed to demonstrate absolute power. They had never been used in anger, only tested against uninhabited worlds. The fleet jumped toward Sol System with an escort of 5,000 warships. It was the largest single military operation in recorded history. The Sol System was humanity's heart. Destroy Earth, and the humans would have no choice but to surrender. Admiral David Chen watched the Council fleet approach from his command center in the asteroid belt. Earth's defenses had been tracking them since they entered human space. The planet-killer weapons were exactly what humanity had anticipated. They were, in fact, what humanity had been hoping the Council would try. They took the bait, Chen said to his staff. They think Earth is vulnerable because we've kept our defensive systems hidden. They're about to learn what we've really been building for the last 3 years. The Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol System. They expected to find Earth defended by whatever remaining human ships could be scraped together. Instead, they found a fortress, unlike anything they had ever imagined. The entire solar system had been turned into a defensive weapon. The asteroid belt had been mined and rigged with thousands of hidden weapons platforms. The moon held railguns capable of accelerating projectiles to relativistic speeds. Earth's orbital space was filled with defensive satellites that used technologies the Council didn't recognize. But the real surprise was the defense network itself. The humans had not just been building ships. They had been developing artificial intelligence systems that coordinated defenses with inhuman precision. Every weapon in the system was linked to a central network that calculated threats and responses faster than any biological mind could process. The planet-killer fleet fired their weapons at Earth. Massive energy beams capable of burning through planetary shields and boiling oceans. But Earth's shields did not work like Council shields. They did not try to absorb or deflect the energy. Instead, they used a technology based on quantum entanglement to redirect the energy into other dimensions. The beams struck the shields and simply disappeared. The Council fleet stared in disbelief as their ultimate weapons failed completely. Before they could regroup, Earth's defenses opened fire. Railgun projectiles moving at 10% the speed of light crossed the distance in minutes. Point defense lasers created a web of light that no ship could navigate through safely. Missiles with guidance systems that... The human counteroffensive began 3 weeks after the failed attack on Earth. It started not with a massive fleet engagement, but with something the Council found far more terrifying. It started with silence. Council worlds across 3 sectors suddenly lost contact with their outer colonies. Communication arrays went dark. Supply convoys disappeared without sending distress signals. Scout ships sent to investigate never returned. For 2 weeks, the Council tried to understand what was happening. Then the first survivors arrived. They came in damaged ships, their crews traumatized and babbling about shadows that moved between stars. About human vessels that appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating precision and vanished before defenders could respond. About weapons that seemed to break the laws of physics. Counselor Vren listened to the reports with growing horror. How many ships are the humans using for these attacks? We don't know, the intelligence officer admitted. Our survivors report seeing different ship designs in each attack. Some describe small vessels, others report massive carriers. The numbers vary from dozens to thousands. It's as if the humans have an unlimited supply of ships. The truth was both simpler and more frightening than the Council imagined. While they had been focused on attacking human colonies, humanity had been building hidden shipyards in the depths of the Oort cloud, buried deep in asteroid fields, concealed within the atmospheres of gas giants, automated factories that could produce a warship in days instead of months. Humanity had industrialized warfare in ways the Council had never considered necessary. For 12,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through overwhelming strength. They built enough ships to deter any potential conflict, but they had never needed to optimize for mass production. Why build 1,000 ships when 100 would do? Why develop automated production when skilled craftsmen could build better vessels? Humanity had asked different questions. Why build one ship when you could build 1,000? Why use skilled labor when machines could work faster? Why make each ship unique when standardized designs could be produced in days? The humans had spent 3 years preparing for total war, while the Council had spent 3 years assuming their superiority would be enough. Captain Sarah Zhao commanded a strike force of 50 ships as they approached a Council mining world called Vector Prime. The planet was unremarkable except for its rich deposits of rare metals used in Council ship production. It was defended by 200 warships and orbital defense platforms. Deploy the swarm, Zhao ordered. From the holds of her ships, thousands of small drones launched into space. Each drone was barely the size of a fighter craft, cheap to produce and carrying a single mission. Overwhelm the defenses through sheer numbers. They swarmed toward the Council fleet like insects, forcing the defenders to engage with point defense weapons. While the drones kept the Council ships occupied, Zhao's strike force swept past the distracted defenders and hit the mining facilities directly. They didn't try to capture the planet. They simply destroyed everything that made it valuable. Mining equipment, refineries, orbital elevators, all reduced to scrap in minutes. Disengage, Zhao ordered. Next target. By the time the Council defenders realized what had happened and cleared away the drone swarm, the human ships were gone. The pattern repeated across dozens of worlds. The humans didn't try to hold territory. They just destroyed infrastructure and moved on, bleeding the Council's industrial capacity. Fleet Commander Zarthun, now demoted and serving as an advisor after the failure at Earth, tried to explain the situation to the War Directorate. His flagship had been destroyed. His career was in ruins, but he understood the humans better than anyone else in the Council military. They're not fighting to win territory, he explained. They're fighting to destroy our ability to wage war. Every attack targets our logistics, our production, our supply lines. They're trying to starve us out. Then we will adapt, Kethazar insisted. We will strengthen our defenses, protect our industrial worlds, and hunt down their fleets. Zarthun shook his head. You still don't understand. The humans don't fight like we do. We build expensive, powerful ships crewed by trained soldiers. They build cheap, disposable drones controlled by artificial intelligence. We value each ship and try to preserve them. They're willing to lose hundreds of drones to destroy a single valuable target. We think in terms of honor and rules of engagement. They think in terms of efficiency and victory at any cost. You sound like you admire them, Kethazar said coldly. I fear them, Zarthun replied. There's a difference. The Battle of Zenthar proved Zarthun's fears were justified. The Council's capital world had always been considered impregnable. It sat at the center of the most heavily defended region of space. 5,000 ships guarded the system. Orbital defense platforms ringed the planet in layers. Energy shields powerful enough to stop a small moon protected the surface. The humans attacked with a fleet of 20,000 ships. Not the sophisticated warships the Council expected, but a mix of designs ranging from advanced battleships to converted cargo vessels armed with whatever weapons could be mounted. It was a fleet that represented everything humanity could scrape together, but numbers alone would not have been enough to breach Zenthar's defenses. What made the difference was the human willingness to sacrifice their ships in ways the Council could not comprehend. Human vessels loaded with explosives deliberately rammed into defense platforms. Obsolete ships were sent on suicide runs to create gaps in the defensive lines. Entire squadrons accepted certain death to allow the main fleet to advance. The Council defenders fought bravely, but they were not prepared for an enemy that treated their own ships as ammunition. By the time the first human ships entered orbit around Zenthar, the orbital defenses had been reduced to fragments. Then came the part that would be remembered in council nightmares for generations. Human ships, instead of bombarding the planet from orbit, dove directly into the atmosphere. They flew through air that was never meant to support vessels of their size, using aerodynamic designs that seemed impossible. They struck ground targets with precision, then exited the atmosphere and returned to space before the defensive forces could organize a response. The Council's impregnable capital was raided by an enemy that refused to follow conventional warfare rules. The planetary shields designed to stop orbital bombardment were useless against ships that simply flew under them. The ground-based defenses were overwhelmed by the speed and unpredictability of the attacks. Among the human ships was the destroyer Relentless. Captain Zhao led her squadron through the atmosphere of Zenthar at speeds that pushed the structural limits of her vessel. Her target was the Council's Central Military Command Facility. Altitude dropping to 10 kilometers, her pilot reported. Structural stress at 80%. Any lower and we risk breaking apart. Maintain course, Zhao ordered. We need to get under their defense umbrella. The Relentless screamed through the sky, its hull glowing red from atmospheric friction. Ground-based weapons tried to track it, but the ship was moving too fast and too low. When they reached the target, Zhao's weapons officer had exactly 3 seconds to aim and fire. The missiles struck the command facility with devastating accuracy. The building, which had stood for 6,000 years, collapsed into rubble. With it went the nerve center of the Council's military operations. Pull up, the pilot shouted. The Relentless clawed its way back toward space, its engines roaring. 2 Council fighters managed to get close enough for an attack run, but escort ships from Zhao's squadron intercepted them. The destroyer broke through the atmosphere, its hull scarred and smoking, but intact. The battle for Zenthar lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Council's capital was not destroyed, but it was broken. The military command structure was in chaos. The orbital defenses were shattered, and the psychological impact was devastating. If Zenthar could fall, nowhere was safe. In the ruins of the military command facility, salvage crews found a single survivor. Fleet Commander Zarthun had been visiting the headquarters when the human attack began. He was pulled from the rubble with severe injuries but alive. Days later, while recovering in a medical facility, he received an unexpected visitor. Captain Sarah Zhao, still in her flight suit, walked into his room under a flag of truce that she had requested through diplomatic channels. "You're the one who destroyed my flagship at New Britannia," Zarthun said weakly. "I am," Zhao confirmed. "I've read your service record. 300 years of military service. Decorated veteran. By all accounts, a competent and honorable commander. Why are you here?" Zarthun asked. "To answer a question you've been asking yourself," Zhao said. "You want to know how we became such monsters. You want to know how a species could be so willing to sacrifice everything, to use such brutal tactics, to fight with such ruthless efficiency." Zarthun nodded slowly. Zhao sat down in a chair beside his bed. "We didn't become monsters, Commander. We've always been this way. Your species, all the Council species, you achieved peace 12,000 years ago, and then stopped evolving militarily. You built ships to maintain order, not to fight wars. You created rules of engagement that made sense for conflicts between civilized species who shared common values." She leaned forward, but humanity never stopped. 50 years after the war ended, former Admiral James Chen stood on the observation deck of the Terran Concordat headquarters and looked out at the stars. He was 83 years old now, his hair white and his face lined with years of command decisions that still haunted him. He had been just 33 when the war began, a young officer serving under his father. Now he was the elder statesman of a galaxy that humanity controlled through fear rather than respect. The war had not ended with a peace treaty. It had ended with exhaustion and surrender. After the fall of Zenthar, the Council had fractured. Some species sued for separate peace agreements. Others fought on with desperate determination. Humanity refused to negotiate. They had made their terms clear from the beginning: unconditional surrender and complete dismantling of the Galactic Council. What followed was 3 years of brutal warfare. Humanity ground down the Council's resistance system by system, world by world. When species surrendered, humanity granted them mercy and allowed them to govern themselves under Terran oversight. When species resisted, humanity responded with overwhelming force. The Thrak species, led by Counselor Vren, had chosen to fight to the end. Their homeworld was a fortress world designed over centuries to be unconquerable. Humanity besieged it for 6 months, then deployed a weapon the Council had never seen. It was called a kinetic impactor, a simple concept made terrifying by scale. A small asteroid accelerated to near-light speed and aimed at the planet. The impact released energy equivalent to 1 million nuclear weapons. The Thrax homeworld did not survive. Neither did the Thrax species. They were the first of the Council species to face extinction, but they were not the last. In total, 31 of the 47 Council species were extinct by the time the war ended. Some were destroyed by direct military action. Others collapsed when their civilizations fell apart, without the resources to sustain them. A few committed mass suicide rather than face life under human rule. The remaining 16 species existed in scattered colonies, their populations reduced, their spirits broken. They had learned the lesson that the Council never understood. Humanity was not just willing to fight. Humanity was willing to win at any cost. James Chen turned away from the window as a young officer approached him. "Sir, the delegation from the newly discovered Krell species is here for their integration meeting." Chen nodded slowly. "Show them in." The Krell were a bird-like species discovered at the far edge of the galaxy. They had developed faster than light travel only 20 years ago, and had been exploring their local region of space when they encountered human scout ships. The scouts had delivered the standard message, an invitation to join the Terran Concordat, along with a historical database explaining what had happened to the Galactic Council. 3 Krell representatives entered the room, their feathers fluffed up in what Chen's xenobiology training told him was a sign of nervousness. They were prey animals by evolution, and every instinct was probably screaming at them that they were in danger. "Welcome," Chen said, gesturing to seats. "Please sit. This is not an interrogation. We simply want to discuss the terms of your integration into the Concordat." The lead Krell, whose name translated roughly as Swiftwing, chirped nervously. "We have reviewed the historical database you provided. We understand the war, the casualties, She paused, searching for words. "The consequences of resistance, and?" Chen asked gently. "We accept all terms," Swiftwing said quickly. "We will submit to Terran authority. We will provide resource surveys of our territory. We will adopt your communication protocols. We will not develop weapons without approval. We will not form alliances without permission. We accept everything. Please don't hurt us." Chen felt his heart break a little. This was what humanity had become. The species that had once dreamed of exploring the stars and making friends among the cosmos were now feared monsters. Children across the galaxy learned about humans the way human children once learned about mythical demons. "We don't want to hurt you," Chen said quietly. "We never wanted any of this." "Then why did you do it?" Swiftwing asked, her voice trembling. "The historical records show 31 extinct species. Worlds destroyed. Trillions dead. How could you justify such destruction?" Chen was silent for a long moment. "Because the Council forced us to become something we never wanted to be. They declared war on us for refusing to submit. They tried to exterminate us when we fought back. And we learned that in this galaxy, mercy is interpreted as weakness. If we had shown compassion, if we had stopped before achieving total victory, other species would have seen it as an opportunity to attack us when we were vulnerable." He looked directly at Swiftwing. "So we made a choice. We decided that if we had to be monsters to survive, we would be the most terrifying monsters the galaxy had ever seen. We would make sure that no species would ever dare attack humanity again. And we succeeded. The cost was our souls." Swiftwing and her companion sat in shocked silence. Finally, she spoke again. "What happens to us now?" "You join the Concordat," Chen said. "You'll have autonomy over your internal affairs. You'll trade freely with other Concordat members. You'll be protected by the Terran military from any external threats. In exchange, you'll follow Concordat law and contribute resources toward collective defense. And if we break these rules, then we'll deal with it proportionally," Chen said. "Minor infractions get warnings. Serious violations get sanctions. Attempts to build weapons or form alliances against humanity." He let the sentence hang unfinished. Swiftwing nodded slowly. "We understand. We will comply." After the Krell delegation left, Chen sat alone in his office for a long time. On his desk was a photograph from before the war. His father, Admiral David Chen, standing with other officers in front of the United Nations building. They were smiling, full of hope and excitement about humanity's future among the stars. His father had died during the final assault on the last council stronghold. He had led from the front, as he always did, and took a direct hit from an energy weapon. James had been commanding a different section of the fleet and only learned about his father's death after the battle ended. Before he died, David Chen had recorded a final message for his son. James had watched it 1,000 times over the years. In it, his father looked tired and sad. "By the time you watch this, the war will probably be over. We'll have won because we're too stubborn to lose. But James, I need you to remember something. We fought this war because we had no choice. We became monsters because they forced us to. But that doesn't mean we have to stay monsters forever." The message had continued. "When you lead the Concordat, and I know you will, I want you to try something different. Be fair, be just. But most importantly, be better than we had to be during the war. Show the galaxy that humans can be more than just efficient killers. Show them we can build something worth having." James had tried to follow his father's advice. The Terran Concordat was not the Galactic Council. It did not claim to be a benevolent organization bringing civilization to the galaxy. It was honest about what it was, a human empire maintained by military superiority. But James had worked to make it as fair and just as possible within those constraints. Member species had real autonomy. Terran military forces protected trade routes from pirates and raiders. The technology restrictions were annoying but not oppressive. Most species lived decent lives under the Concordat, even if they resented human dominance. But the fear remained. Every species knew what would happen if they stepped too far out of line. The ruins of the Thrax homeworld served as a permanent reminder of human capacity for destruction. A priority message appeared on James's terminal. It was from the Deep Space Monitoring Network. They had detected something at the edge of the galaxy. Not another developing species, but something else. Energy signatures that matched the profile of another galaxy-spanning civilization. James opened the full report and felt his blood run cold. The signature suggested a civilization that had been watching the Milky Way for some time. They had observed the war between humanity and the Council. They had seen what humanity was capable of, and now they were moving closer, their fleets approaching the galactic rim. Were they coming to make contact? To trade? To conquer? James had no way of knowing, but he knew that humanity would face a choice. Would they respond to this new civilization with the paranoia and violence that had defined the Council War? Or would they try to do better? He thought about Swiftwing and her terrified acceptance of human terms. He thought about the 31 extinct species. He thought about his father's final message. He thought about what humanity had become and what it might still become. James began composing a message to the Terran Military Command. It outlined first contact protocols for approaching the extragalactic civilization. The protocols emphasized caution but not aggression. They authorized defensive preparations but forbade preemptive strikes. They prioritized communication and understanding over demonstrations of force. He knew he would face opposition. There were many in the Terran military who believed that humanity's survival depended on maintaining an image of invincible strength. They would argue that showing any weakness would invite attack. And they would not be entirely wrong, Bow.